Hello and welcome to the third episode of the series Conscious Living, Conscious Dying, which I, Heidi Hörnlein from the wisdomfactory.net, am creating in honor of my co-host and husband, Mark Davenport, who died, it's now 4 months ago. So this was the reason to create this show. And the intention is to inspire you that death, yes, it is tragic, but it is also, it has something where we shouldn't shy away of. We have already done 2 episodes, one in English and one in German. And if you want to see the program, you can go to bit.ly/WF in big letters and then program, and then clicking on the pictures, you will be guided to the replay page. And also, if you want to subscribe for the next 2 episodes, you can go to bit.ly/WF with big letters and then living. So you will get reminders for the last 2 episodes. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter. And then anyway, you will get information of new episodes. We will take on again conscious aging in February. And some of the conscious dying stuff will be there too. In between, we will have some other less sad or less challenging stuff in December and January. So I think I've said enough. Today, end of life care, how we accompanied a family member in their death process. And I've invited 4 people who have experience with that. And I would invite you to present yourself and shortly before we dive into the sharing. Okay, so who wants to start? Unmute yourself and just start.
Okay, I'll start. Done this before in German. So, I'm Hannah from Germany and have known Heidi for 8 years or more in the German Integral Movement. And I lived for a long time, for over 15 years in Scotland in a Tibetan center. So it's nice to have a Scottish accent in the group. And there I learned a lot about conscious dying, also thinking about one's own death and making oneself aware every day that people die, that it's a very natural thing. And I saw the death of several people, which was sad, but also very moving and very positive. And then I went to look after my mother 11 years ago when she turned 80. And then I worked in an old people's home in Germany, a professional one, a commercial one. And then I was horrified to see how old people and particularly the dying process is dealt with in these commercial homes. So. And then I looked after my mother. She lived another 11 years under my good care, and it was very strong experience. I would talk more about that. And in that period, I also spent 1.5 years with my father. And so I was with both my parents in their last breaths and their last years and days and minutes.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, well, maybe I should go next as I'm the Scottish person that Hannah referred to. Very nice to have somebody else there with that link. My name is Jane Duncan Rogers, and 7 years ago, almost exactly 7 years ago, my husband died. He had been ill with cancer for 1 year, and I was supporting him through that. And I was also present when he actually died. He's the only person that I've been with when the death has actually happened. More recently, about 6 weeks ago, but my mum and my dad both died within the same week. I wasn't there when they actually died, but I had been helping along with my two brothers and my sister to care for them. Although that, you know, the thing about death is you never know when it's going to be the last year or the last week or the last day or the last anything. So we didn't realize it was going to be the last year looking after them until it was. And that's how as it has turned out to be. I've learned an enormous amount. The work that I do now with the social enterprise Before I Go Solutions is directly as a result of what happened for me after my husband died. So I guess we'll get a chance to talk about that later, but yeah, that's for now.
Thank you. Barbara, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, I'm Barbara, and I live in Paradise, California, which is in Northern California in the US, and lived half my life in Southern California, and then have lived the last half in Northern California, and I like Northern better. Learned a lot about water conservation and everything since I moved here. Didn't learn that in Southern California, unfortunately. May have been the times, I don't know. Anyhow, my husband passed away a year ago, and from Parkinson's and dementia. And looking back, they look at shuffling as they walk as being a sign of Parkinson's. And looking back, I think he had it many, many, many years, really, but we just never knew. So it's been quite an experience. I've lost a lot of family members, parents, two grandbabies, our son, my sister, a lot of loss. But keep going. That's my motto.
Yeah, thank you. Marianne?
So my name is Marianne, and I'm living in Southern California, so one Barbara doesn't like so much. And I'm also Heidi's sister, so we know each other ever since I came about. She was there a little bit longer than me. And both her and I were with my father during his last weeks when he was becoming very poorly in his health. He was suffering from colon cancer. And I actually was with him when he passed away in the middle of the night. And then much, much later, that was many, many years ago, like 32 years now, something like that. He passed away when he was quite young for our times. He was 60 at the time. Our mother lived to be 89, and we, Heidi, myself, and my sister-in-law, or our sister-in-law, and our niece was actually with her when she passed. And I think that was a much more conscious experience because we had been very conscious about the process of dying and being much more informed. With our father, really, it was one of the, or he was an exception that he was able to stay home during that process. That was still a time, there was no hospice yet, so to speak. Like, you know, it's now an establishment in many places. And he was in tremendous pain and needed morphine. So there was an exception made that my mother was able to administer it. Otherwise, he would have had the experience of being in the hospital and passing away by himself. So with our mother, that was 8 years ago now, Heidi? So yeah, so 8 years ago. And we can, well, I'm sure Heidi will share a lot about that too. And then more recently, my daughter-in-law's father passed away, and she took care of him. And they live less than 5 minutes from me. So I was part of the process in a sense I wasn't with him when he passed, she was, but I was part of the process of seeing also family dynamics, how the children reacted, he also had a twin brother who came maybe 3 weeks before he passed away. And that was a very interesting experience because the twin brother didn't want his brother to die. He was in complete denial. And just also seeing how that affected the person who was in the process of passing on, not being allowed really to go, but wanting to go. So that was, you know, quite an experience, let's put it that way.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we will talk also about that, about our own experience to accompany a person in the death process or before, and then also about the other people around and how they relate to the dying people. Yeah, I'm Heidi, as Marianne said, her sister. I was not present in the death moment of my father, but I remember in that time I lived in Berlin. I was 27 years old, and Marianne was very young. She was 22, and this was quite an experience, I think, in this age, without any preparation of that. But we just, when I saw my father in this state of being yellow and how do you say, eingefallen, the cheeks, you know, like, I don't know the word now.
Wasted away.
Okay, yeah. So I decided to go and help my mother to keep him at home. And so with my sister, with Marianne, we did 1 week her and 1 week me. And when he died, it was her turn, and I was in a music master class. And when I came home, he was already gone. And then with our mother, I was there the last 3 weeks, more or less, all the time. And that was very interesting. We might talk later about that. And then I accompanied an ex-partner here in Italy in a hospital. So I was there for about 2 weeks, 4 hours a day, more or less. That was also an interesting experience, how they are treated in the hospital. Death shouldn't happen. That's a sort of a failure, you know. So no preparation for that, no allowances to make the situation for them convenient for dying, let's say, but they should be alive and do still exams and, you know, all these things. But we will talk about that later. Yeah, and lately, Mark, my husband, and I was really present when he died, very unexpectedly, although he had cancer and we knew it would come. But as you said before, you don't know the day. It might come someday, but or even he could have lived other 3-4 months and getting worse and worse and worse. But obviously he, thanks God, decided to go when it was still decent for him to go. And he was awake in his mind and he witnessed everything. So with that, he fulfilled himself the wish to be present when he dies, because for him, life was an adventure and something to get to know, wanting to know. Okay, and with that, I think the presentations are finished. Now let's go into it. I thought to do this series as an inspiration for people. What do you think is inspiring in being with the people you love, instead of sending them away where you know, don't know what happens, and afterwards they phone, your friend, your father, whoever has died, and my condolences, you know. What did inspire you to be with them?
Yeah, maybe I'll start again. Beat you to it. I think in our culture, it's very much. We see Jane. Anyway, in our culture, it's very much common to be in denial of death, and it's a shame that it's a great opportunity to be with somebody, especially somebody you love, Also, if you work with dying people, or you volunteer to be with dying people, that's also a very good opportunity. But I'm really, really very grateful that I was with both my parents in their last years and weeks and days and minutes of their life, and it's actually nothing to be afraid of, especially when you can create, if you lose the fear of death yourself, and then you can create a space that is actually quite holy. When a person dies without fear, and without too much pain. Actually, I want to say I have experienced people dying if they have very severe cancer or something. Then a hospice or a good palliative care department in a hospital can be the right place, because at home is a good place if the person is not dying of a disease like my mother. But also my father, he was in an old people's home, but a good one with a high ethics, and I was able to be with him, and nobody disturbed me, and they treated him with great respect, and the nurses and in that home, they were Christian. It was a Christian home, so they knew there was something, or they believed there was something more than just the body. So they treated him with much more gentleness, and much more gentleness and space in the last days. So that is something that is it's actually very easy. There's actually nothing you need to know or learn, and it's not horrible as one expects. But it's actually can be very, very beautiful and spiritual experience. Yeah. So maybe so much from me for now.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I felt with my mom when I was present, and Marianne and me holding her hand and singing shortly before. And also with Mark, it was holy moments. So, yeah. Somebody else wants to jump in?
I jump in. So for me, and I agree that it doesn't have to be the homes, that hospice can be an excellent place. And I know that at least here, there is a very active hospice movement, or however you want to call it, available. And with my daughter's father, there was a nurse coming every day, and there was somebody available she could call when she didn't know. Now, he was in a lot of pain towards the end of his life. And actually, when he passed, I wasn't with him, but what she told me, it was quite violent. Said he kind of he had like a seizure, and so it was hard for her to have that picture in her mind. She was like wishing not to, but that's not always. And he died of a disease. He didn't die of having become old and going. And again, with him, like I said, his brother was so much in denial that he might have been able to slip away earlier. He was actually begging my son to find him something that he could transition, which is, a whole, I don't know about the legality in many countries, but, assisted suicide is becoming more legal in many places as a choice for people which are ready to move. I think so overall, I had been very active in the birthing movement and have been at several births. And I feel birth and death are very closely connected, because you could almost look at birth as a form of death of the lives the baby knew in uterus. So that's kind of what I have learned to choose to look at as death, that we are transitioning into another reality. We have no idea what it is, and we can only go by what people have been saying who kind of were on the brink and were brought back. And it seems universally that they are sharing a positive experience. That's one. The other one, too, now we didn't get to see our father after he had passed. Our mother didn't want us to see him. But there, a lot of times you find that even people passing in pain after they are passed, it seems to be a very peaceful face, that things are changing that way. And I feel with our mother, with our father, we weren't very prepared, but also he was in so much pain that it was this thing as a caretaker where on one hand, you're hoping for that miracle. There's always that irrational place where we hope for, the disease to just go away and to go back to where we were before, even though the rational mind knows that's not possible, right? But in our rational mind, I feel we had already come to the point of accepting or feeling that this actually would be a relief for him. So from that point, I think it was easier to be with him in the transition because it felt like now the suffering is over, if that makes sense, because he was just in so much pain so often. With our mother, I was living in the States and came back because, everybody was saying this looks like we're really coming to the end. And there was a person in our circles there, or my sister-in-law's circle, who actually had been a nurse working with hospice and being with a lot of people as they transitioned. And she happened to do a course that very time, just right in time, on how to help somebody in the transition. So to me, that was a very good experience to be able to go there and learn that when people are in transition, they don't like a light touch. They want a firmer touch. So their light touch is actually irritating, physical things like that, or to not have bright light shining into their face and, a lot of things like that. And we also did a meditation of just visualizing the soul. It was like visualizing the soul as a bird and flying and, all different kinds of things. And it just felt like such a, how a lot of people believe there's no coincidence. And so it felt like this was meant to be able to go through that and then apply a lot of said experience, especially knowing about the physical part, knowing about not like to offer food and drink, but if a person says no, they don't want this, to not give it because the system is actually shutting down, and to give liquids could be causing pain instead of helping the person and stuff like that. So I felt all of that was very good information. And then you, Heidi, you had done a lot of mental preparation as well. So, and you were sharing a lot of that too.
Yeah, and that was not so. That was not so when our father died. You were 22 and had no idea, and I was 27, and I had never thought about, in that sense, about death. Only later I found the book of Kübler-Ross, and then I studied it, the 5 Phases of Death. So looking back, I cannot really remember if our father did the 5 phases. I don't know. Anyway, with Mark, I felt that he didn't. He didn't go into the anger. He was really very much accepting, and he was seeing the whole thing as an adventure about the body, what he's learning about his body. He was so fascinated, at least when he was free of pain. I mean, the pain moments are always, I think, at least it should be, the pain medication now much better than in 79. So there should be, when you have the right doctors and the right treatment, that should be contained better. With Mark, it was sort of contained, not 100%, but at least there was a possibility. But he still had to go through an hour or so before it went better. Anyway, yeah, I want to give you both now the possibility.
I just wanted to say something about, because your question was, what was it inspired you? And, or at least that's what I heard. And, in my life, I had read quite a lot about death as a concept. I had studied it professionally. For myself, I always have had the attitude that to die would be an adventure. For me, it would be an adventure. It was different for Philip when he got cancer, stomach cancer, and he lived with that for a year before he died, because he was afraid of dying. We did talk about it a little bit. But anyway, there's lots of things that inspired me actually in the run up to this. He died in hospital. But from my reading, I understood that there was a possibility of the person, when they were coming close to the end, that there might be a message that would come from them that would be understandable, perhaps only to somebody very close. So I kind of had my ears open for this just in case. And in fact, it did happen a couple of days before he died. I had not been staying in the hospital with him that night. A friend had been. And she told me the next day that he had said that he wanted to watch the television. Now, in 6 weeks, he had never watched the television. So this in itself was strange. Then he said that he wanted to watch a program called Countdown. Now, she was from America. She didn't know what that program meant. In the UK, Countdown is a program about numbers and letters. And it was Philip's favorite television program. He loved it. He would watch it every day. When she told me that that's what he wanted to do, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was telling me that he was counting down. I just knew it. And it was such a relief to know that even if it was unconscious on his part, that some part of him knew that. And he was letting me know it, because nobody else would have known the significance of that. And it was... So therefore, I knew that he was preparing, that he was nearly ready to go, which is a good thing because he was in a terrible state. And by this stage, I just wanted him to be out of pain, out of the place that he was in, even if that meant he was dying, which it did. So that for me was really, it was like a gift that he gave me, and one that I could then pass on to other people, because I wasn't any longer reading about other people's stories. This had happened to me, and so I knew that it can happen. So yeah, that was just one of the things.
Barbara?
Oh, I turned it off. I turned off the wrong thing by mistake.
Yes, no problem. Barbara, would you like to share? You must unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, my husband was working when his dad was dying, and his dad had cancer, and it was many, many years ago. There again, no hospice, the only thing they had was morphine, and his mom had a nurse come in, and then she learned, well, my sister-in-law actually learned how to give the shots too. It got to where he was having morphine shots every 15 minutes. The doctor said, whatever he needs, give it to him. And so at the end, that was kind of how things were going. My husband was working, and two of his brothers went and got him from work and brought him. And his dad hung on until he got there. And within, very short time, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, his dad passed. And we actually saw, a bunch of us were in the room, we saw his spirit leave his body. His body rippled, and you couldn't say, oh, I saw an image, but you sort of did. That rippled up into the air and disappeared. it was a very moving, remarkable thing that happened with all the other relatives and my husband and everybody else. They weren't at home for one reason or another, either illness or falls. With my husband, he fell and had stitches in his head more than once, and had his ear sewn back together one time. He made just fell a number of times and often hit things as he went down. And he had dementia. He had, at the start, it was just kind of doing unwise things. Jump up, start across the room without his walker, and down he'd go. And things like that. Later, it was hard for him to get up. And so we had to assist him. The last year of his life, our daughter, moved in with us. And so she does in-home care for people, and through IHSS, which is in-home supportive services. And she has done that type of thing for many years. And so she was a big help to me and to him. We were having to dress him. For 2 years, actually, he got to where he wasn't able to dress himself any longer. And so it was hard for me. He weighed a little more than I did, and he was a little taller than I am. And so it was challenging. Sometimes he'd be in the bathroom before Lori moved in with us. Sometimes he'd be in the bathroom and couldn't get back up standing, and I'd have to lift him because there was no one around. If he fell, I could call the emergency 911, and the fireman, I could ask for a fireman assist, and they would come get him up, which happened many times. They got to know us very well. We recognized the head one that would come out. We recognized him real well because we'd seen him so many times. His dementia turned into, that last year especially, turned into a very frightening thing for Cliff. He was terrified a lot of the time. He was seeing things that weren't there. He was, some of the time it was just, things that weren't scaring him. Sometimes we'd sit down to eat, and we always had trays and sat in the living room, watched TV while we ate. And this one time we started eating, and he says to me, "Well, aren't those other people going to eat?" And I said, "What other people, honey?" And he says, "Well, all those other people that are here." And early on, when he started having hallucinations, he would get kind of, upset or disturbed by the fact that, we weren't seeing what he was seeing. So I said to him, "Okay, if you wonder about what's going on," I said, "ask me. If you see something that you're not sure about," I said, "I'll always tell you." I said, "Whatever I tell you is going to be the truth." I had people telling me, "Oh, no, just go along with whatever they're saying." That would not have worked for him. He wanted to know if he was having a hallucination. We called them, sometimes I'd use the term hallucination, but usually I'd say, like a bad dream type of thing. That's what you're seeing right now. The one time he was in the hospital, not the very last time, but near the end, he said, I want to tell you something, but I have to wait until we're home because it's too dangerous to tell you here. And I thought, oh my, is he being injured? What's going on? And so finally my daughter got her ear right down by his lips. He talked very softly. We could barely hear him, actually. And so she says, whisper it to me. Well, it turned out he thought in his mind there was gangsters going around the hospital killing everyone. And he said, if they hear me telling you, they're going to come kill all of us. So we had to assure him that that was a hallucination. It was one of those bad dream things, and everything was okay. Other times at home there, if I was out of the room for 5 minutes, maybe, he did a lot of sleeping that last year, a lot of sleeping. And he had a chair that he could lean back. He had the hand control, tip the chair back and lay back. And so he slept a lot. And if he woke up and didn't see me, he would totally panic. And the one day I took my doggie out to go potty and came in, and he was just beside himself, panicking. And I said, what's the matter? And he says, I woke up and nobody was here. I was all alone. I was on a deserted island by myself, and I couldn't find anybody. And so that was very difficult. He ended up the last week or thereabouts, he had to go in the hospital. He had a lot of UTIs, urinary tract infections. And that he had another one, and it was so severe they had to hospitalize him. And so he was there, I think, 3 or 4 days. And then they sent him, he was too weak to even stand, so we couldn't deal with him at home. My daughter was working, and so I was there alone with him too much of the time that he couldn't, I couldn't handle him. And so anyhow, they put him into this one nursing home that was the best one in town, I felt, had a rehab section. And they put him in there for rehab. And so the first day, once he got kind of settled in, I said to him, now you want to do everything they have you do so that you can come home. And he just very quietly and seriously, he says, I'm not coming home. And I think he willed himself to leave. He was so distraught about his life. I think that he willed himself to leave. So, but it's not been, I guess, as devastating for me to lose him, because basically the last 2 years I was grieving that he was going. He was on his way so much of the time that last 2 years that I think, it made it almost easier knowing he was out of the pain he was in when he left. So.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara, for that story. And what I'm hearing, and I would say agree, often death is much better than a long time of suffering, and I hear that from all of you. So I'm wondering now, what did it do with you? How did you overcome, and do you overcome these moments? I'm overcoming it sort of by creating the show, going out and wanting to do something useful for other people out of my experience. And I'm grateful that you are helping me in that. What is for you? How did you deal with the challenges before and then with the loss?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, it's very different if you're accompanying your parents age 90, or both my parents were over 90 when they passed, and they were well prepared. They were both actually ready to die, and it was the right time to die. So I didn't grieve for either of them. I can't imagine, or it would be unbearable to imagine my husband getting sick and having. I mean, I would of course look after him, but it would be a terrible tragedy. And the same for, I think even worse, maybe, I don't know if I think even worse for people whose children die, because it's just the wrong way around. Whereas a person dying of old age, you know, living to be 90, and whether they get sick or not, and then dying with their children and their loved ones around them, I think that's very natural. So then you don't have to grieve. Then it's actually a relief, and it is hard. Actually, a lot of what you were saying just now is really moved me, because my mother also had Parkinson's for 15 years, but it didn't develop into dementia. I think partly because she was so strong-willed. So she kept training her mind, training her brain, and when she forgot something, she also had epileptic fits until she got good medication to stop the grand mal fits, and each time then she lost some memory, but she didn't lose she didn't lose the being in the present moment. But because she also worked hard at it, she did get the hallucinations in the last 6 months or so. And she was quite a spiritual kind of person, and she worked a lot with nature spirits and angels and all of that. So seeing beings that aren't really there was not unusual to her. She had actually trained to see them or to sense them. But one day she said to me, "Oh, there was this. I was waking up or half asleep, and then there was this woman walking past my bed, and she had a tiny bedroom. I mean, there's no way to walk through. There was only one door, and she was wearing this strange old-fashioned clothes. And then I realized that it was a ghost. So then she was wondering, what is the message? Why did she appear? Maybe she's coming from the other world to tell me something." And then one day I told her that my father-in-law or stepfather, and Ralph's stepdad, he also has Parkinson's, and he's much younger, and he's getting quite demented. So, and I told her that he was having hallucinations. That's what my husband said. And then she was totally relieved. She said, "Oh, it's just next time she saw some figures that aren't there." She just thought, "Oh, well, it's just hallucinations. It's just my mind. It's my mind playing tricks on me." So it was quite funny to see that, how she kept a grasp on reality, and also was able to let go of. She had a good balance of, on one hand, letting go when she realized there's something I can't do anymore, or I can't enjoy anymore. You know, gradually, your life, your world becomes very small. First, you can't go out without help. Then you can't go out without a Zimmer. Then she was even afraid to go out in the wheelchair. And then she could only move in the wheelchair, but move herself. So gradually, her world became smaller, and then she accepted that. But also she did try to keep her independent, and she did manage very well with my help to keep her independence till right up until the end, and by just being inventive. You know, when she couldn't walk with a Zimmer frame anymore because her knees would just give way. It was part of like you were saying, your husband kept falling. Luckily, she was aware enough not to have this uncontrolled movements that you sometimes get with Parkinson's. She didn't have that symptom so much. So we just got her a wheelchair without the footrests, and then she just paddled along in that quite happily, and still managed the toilet till quite late by herself, which I was grateful for. So yeah, so I really feel that it's very important to relearn, for all of us, our cultures in the West, to learn how to look after our relatives when they're sick or when they grow old. And I think some kind of training in for me it was the Buddhist training, or I know also some kind of spiritual training or meditation training, I think is very, very useful. And but also just kind of to find again, I think we have the instinct. I think when you look into third world countries, or even the Turkish cleaning ladies in the old people's home, they were much better with the demented people than the trained nurses, because they still had the kind of natural instincts of how to care and how to be. And you can sense, if you're open, you can sense what the person needs and what the person wants, and you can be calm inside yourself. Yeah, so that's a few things. Yeah, maybe not answering your question, but some things that were on top of my mind while I was hearing you talk.
What I'm hearing you say is, when the time is there and the people have had a full life, then the grief doesn't need to be as big as when it is, for instance, a partner or a child. And I sort of rationally can understand that. I'm wondering, Jane, you have...
About that. I want to say something about that, because in relationship to my mum and dad, my dad had had a stroke a year earlier, and he had improved to the point where he could walk or shuffle around, but he wasn't able to talk, and he was incontinent, and the quality of his life wasn't great. So when he died, it wasn't entirely unexpected, and it was a relief, like you said. I mean, it was sad, but I was glad at the same time. But then my mum died a week later. Now, she did have a terminal illness. She'd been diagnosed with motor neurone, but she was still able just about to get around. And but if you'd seen her sitting down, you wouldn't have known there was anything wrong with her. She was 84. We knew she was going to be dying at some point, probably within the year or so, because she had a kind of medium rate of motor neurons. So it wasn't expected that she would die. And I have found myself, yes, my mum was 84. Yes, I knew that she knew she'd had a great life. Yes, she knew that she was coming to terms with the fact that it was coming to the end. And I really miss her. And I've been, overcome with tears often in the last few weeks, even at the same time as knowing that I'm glad for her that she doesn't have to go through any more of the awfulness of motor neurone. I'm glad for her that in my belief system, she and my dad are together. But it's awful for me and for my sister, who was living more closely involved every day. And every day I have that mixture of emotions going on. And yet I know enough about it to not suppress any of those feelings, but some people, she could have lived happily if she hadn't have been diagnosed with that for another 10 years. And she didn't. And my challenge is to accept that. But actually, there was another challenge that I wanted to say about this, and it was in the care for them in the last couple of years, because they needed quite a lot of extra care. And one of the things that I noticed was I wanted to do everything for them. I wanted to do the cooking. I wanted to do the washing up. I wanted to do the cleaning. I wanted to do everything. And actually, I had to really kind of slow down, like you were saying, and pay attention and tune in, because what I discovered was that they needed to do some things for themselves. And the things that they could still do, I needed to step back from. Even if it took them ages, they needed to do it. And that was really a very important lesson that I learned. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. And you have written, from the experience of your dying your husband, you have written a book. I think it came out just now, Gifted by Grief.
So that came out in 2015. It's more, there's a more recent book since then. But yes, and that was one of the other ways that I managed in both cases, in both deaths, in all three rather, was writing. I mean, especially with my husband, I wrote in my journal masses and masses, and a lot of that was then condensed into the book later on, which became a kind of cathartic process for me. So, and that's always somebody, if other people have some kind of creative outlet, that's what I encourage them to look towards to help them process feelings. For me, it certainly worked, and it still works because I'm still writing.
Yeah, that's good. And at this point, I want to do a little bit publicity for you, because shortly before Mark died, he still felt sort of healthy. We did a course with you. Yeah. How was it called? I've forgotten.
Before I Go.
Before I Go Solutions.
Yeah.
And there you give a template of questions which are important for the others who are remaining to know. And Mark had been to do that. And actually, it had helped me. He didn't do everything, and I haven't done yet everything. Fortunately, he didn't have a whole lot to regulate, but it was helpful. And I certainly will do that because I'm now alone. My sister in San Diego, what does she know where my bank accounts are? My computer, how to do all these things, and my house, all this. I need to even do videos to tell people how things go. And it was such a good introduction, and I sure will do it. And the other thing, which I really am grateful for your course, you suggested in one of the sessions to create a legacy for the person who is dying or die. And that was the idea which I'm doing. I have almost finished the ebook for Mark, with stories, with testimonials from other people, and with photos. And I'm really grateful for that. And it also was part of the grieving process, that I could see all the old photos, and go through and think about stories we lived together, or I know about him. And so even very few people are interested in it, but that doesn't matter. That will be out, and really great ideas. So she's doing the courses. Connect with her. That's really a good thing.
Thank you so much. I mean, I really appreciate that. And of course, now my mum and dad had been brilliant students. They had completed all their end of life plan stuff a year previously, because they were great champions of mine. And oh my goodness, as their executor, I have been so grateful for all that information. I knew in theory that it would be useful and comforting to know that you're carrying out what somebody had said they wanted, but I hadn't had that experience. But I've now had that experience, and it is indescribable how useful and helpful and nourishing and comforting and such a solace. So yeah. And it was great that you were doing it, and thank you for sharing about that. And if anybody's interested, the website is beforeigosolutions.com. So thank you very much, Heidi.
Yeah, I recommend that, really. Thank you. And Marianne, we have about 7 minutes until the hour, so
yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm so happy that you both set up, because that's some I'm working on at this point. And there's also actually in my friendship circle of the older people, there's a lot of death cleaning going on. So people are going through their own stuff to say, hey, I don't want to have somebody else to go through all of that and sort it out. And I know also a lot of young people who had to take care of estates of, an aunt or somewhere where there's 100 years of accumulated stuff, and it becomes a nightmare. So yeah, so thank you for that. I think I have to take your course to get the direction, to get the template to do it, because it really is a kindness to people you leave behind, so that's something we can do for the ones we leave behind. But to get back to, dealing with passing of someone, I found with my father, like Heidi said, I was young, and also he was so much in pain that it felt like, a blessing that he was gone. And we were all just going on with our lives at the time. I don't think we did any deep anything, it was like, okay, so we go. I think it was really, really difficult for my mother. When my mother passed on, who was saying, oh, Jane, you were saying, not Jane, Hannah, you were saying how life becomes smaller. And I feel our mother had been kind of living in a chair for the last 9 years of her life. And it became less and less and less what she was doing. And she had Parkinson, Heidi, right? Something like that. I mean, it wasn't quite clear, but definitely her mind was less.
Yes, she was not interested anymore. She was not really ill in that sense. She always feared to get cancer, but she never succeeded, let's say. So it was the nightmare of the life to get cancer.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure she had Parkinson, because she did have the shovel, and she had, second.
But not really life, not in this amount as it was said here. It was
no. She just kind of didn't want to anymore, know. So when she passed, it, like I said, I came back because my sister-in-law, I think at the time, said, you really should come, because this time it's a real thing. Because I had been coming back for, it's coming to an end, for years. It was this, she's not doing well. You have to come. So I probably have done about 10 trips with that idea in mind, something might be happening. But I found that, so at the time, it wasn't a deep grieving, but I feel later, I felt more sad that I didn't feel more sad, if that makes sense, and so I think now I have more conversations with her than I did at the time, or I did in the years before she actually passed. And I think that's definitely something we can do. We can always have conversations with the people who are passed, and it might arrive, it might not arrive, but to be truthful, you can have a conversation with somebody in front of you and they're not hearing what you're saying, So we might as well pretend that somebody is listening. So I find that definitely, a useful way. And I'm really suggesting that to my daughter-in-law a lot, because she did tremendous amount for her dad. He was sick for 7 years, where he was slowly declining, and he lived like an hour and a half away, and she would go once a week and clean his house and do all kinds of stuff for him. And then she took him to her house for the last 3 months or so of his life. But she's going through guilt, thinking she didn't do enough. And if she could have been more patient at one point, or he was not very nice to her a lot of times. And so she was, reactive, like we all would be. And so now she's dealing with guilt. And I'm like, just talk to him, just pretend he is there, and tell him what you feel, So how we have those moments where we wished we could have expressed our appreciation or love more and stuff. And it's like, it's never too late. We can do it now. So, yeah, that's my closing statement.
Thank you. That's bringing in the spiritual part somehow, and I really like that. Yeah, for me, it's not that I talk with Mark, but I have the feeling he is around sometimes, as if he is walking with me when I go down to the Tiber. And I have the idea, if it's true, it's not, I don't know. But since he is passed, when I go down to the river, it's a 3-4 kilometers walk. And since he has passed, I notice, we always went there together before, I notice a big crane. Is it a crane? A big bird, gray bird. And almost every time, even this morning, then it flew away, it is there. And lately somebody told me that this family of these birds are the soul messengers. messengers. And I had before the feeling that it was him, you know, and it feels like, you know, communicating. And I talk with him there as in form of the bird. You can think it's crazy, but, you know, who knows? Who knows? So it can be crazy, it can be true. And we are living in this uncertainty, and I think it's fine. If we can hold the uncertainty, then and not having to decide for one thing or the other, then it is, for me, it's a big solace. And sometimes I cry a little bit, but it's really fine. That would be my ending statement for the content of this session, but it's still Hannah and Barbara for what you want to say at the end.
Yeah, for me, I found I also like to write, but I'm doing it in my head at this point. I haven't put it onto my computer yet. I'm doing all the planning in my head, and I need to get busy and do it in the computer. But anyhow, we had lost our long-lived dog. We had a large dog, Susie, that I had written online about and so forth. And she got very old and she died. I really think of old age, really. And she died 10 days before Cliff did. And so kind of, we didn't tell him until that last day that we went to see him. And then he died a few hours later during the night. But anyhow, we just felt he didn't need to deal with that right then. And told him right at the end that he'd be there with Susie. And he was 88. So a lot of it was easier in that he'd lived a long life. He managed, and then I'm active in my church, and so have been in the same church for 43 years, been a member there all that time. And so, you know, a lot of friends, even though different friends as time went along. And that helps. And then I've got all the yard work to do and the leaves are falling like crazy. So I keep very busy out there raking leaves and picking them up. So that helps a lot too. You find out all of a sudden, you know, you're through another week and nothing dreadful happened. And, you know, like I say, my philosophy is positive living and you just keep going. And Cliff and I were married 1 month short of 62 years. So, you know, which is kind of unbelievable in my head, kind of like, wow. So anyhow, that's, I guess, my ending statement.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. And you really emanate your statement of positive, taking the life positive. It's so lovely to see you. And go ahead in this way. Really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, really, it's so nice. It's really such an amazing group. Last week we had this German group, but this is really. I feel I've known you all my life, all of you, and it's very. Barbara, you are a great example, really, how to age gracefully with this smile on your face. That is a genuine smile, and knowing, I know very well what you've been through, you know, looking after a person with dementia and Parkinson's, and knowing and it being your own partner, you know, so you've really been through a kind of hell, and to have this attitude and to have this so that's really very wonderful. I'm very, very pleased to meet you. And Jane, I want to see more of you. I'm going to check you out and find out whereabouts in Scotland you are. But we'll do that after this session. And Marianne also, it's been very nice meeting Heidi's little sister. And I'm also the little sister of my bigger sisters. And it's also been, it's been very moving or very interesting to hear the different facets of not just lovey-dovey, oh, it was so nice to be there, but it was hard to be there. It was tough being there, and it's not. I mean, I so in a way, this show tonight was more like, well, get real. It's not. Let's not be esoteric about it. At the same time, I still want to say, as I said at the outset, it's not necessary and it's not useful to be afraid of death, because it's just a natural part of life. And the more calm we are, the more prepared we are, the better it can go. And it's not so important when we die, but how we die. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that is a good closing word. It's not so important when we die, but how we die. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. And thank you to the viewers who have been here. And I also see a comment. I'm sorry, I have forgotten to watch the comments. It's Lori B. I will answer to you later. And let's take on the philosophy of Barbara. Positive, going through our lives. And it goes on how long it goes on. And then the other thing, what you said, Hannah, no fear. What we witnessed at the end, it's nothing to be fearful for. Maybe the time before, but not death. That's okay. So, and thank you also, Jane. And I hope you will be soon coming back out of your, let's say, grief holidays. Yeah. And Marianne, thank you too for, it has created a new relationship between us. And I'm very grateful for that. And we will do some shows together in the near future. So thank you, everybody, and come back. 2 more shows. Bye-bye.